You're muted, Lewis. You've muted, Louis.
Okay. Right, I'm sitting in a laundrette, so I'm going to announce the show, pack my bags, go back, and come back to the show later. So, Alistair, you'll co-host if you let people in when they come. Um, they'll just come up on your screen, and you just
Yeah,
go admit.
I've co-hosted things before, but I didn't know I was co-host. How
Well,
exciting!
I didn't know. I didn't know you were co-host, but Waleed has put you as co-host,
Thank you, Waleed.
which is very good of him because I'm not going to be around for the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay,
So, ladies and
fine.
gentlemen, boys and girls, and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And it's Friday, therefore, it is Stories for Children, and it is the inimitable Mike Fachety. Mike, over to you pack my while I pack my washing into its bags.
Well, your lovely clean washing, John.
I shall see you later when I get home. Okay, bye.
See you in a bit, John. Well, how exciting. We're going to have some stories. Now, I had one I was going to tell tonight, but as you're here, Alistair, and you heard it the other day, I shall let it go and do a different one. Um, Perhaps I could do two or three little Nasruddin stories to let us gentle in. How would that be? Okay. Now, oh, Nasruddin. Nasruddin, as you probably know, is sometimes called the Wise Fool. A bit like myself, except he was wise. So there was a new sultan. The new sultan had been appointed. He was a young man. He'd inherited the job. And like a lot of sultans and kings in those days, in the olden days, he liked to get dressed incognito and go to the marketplace and listen to what people were saying about him. And he kept hearing these wonderful things. But then eventually, he started hearing bad things. He started hearing that he was unjust. He was giving people fines that they didn't deserve to have to pay. And he looked into it and he sent his Zamir and he found out that what had happened was his judges were taking advantage of a new sultan by getting out and imposing fines that had no basis in law. So he did what any sensible, level-headed sultan would do, and he had them beheaded. And he started looking for some new judges, and he went out questioning scholars and couldn't find anyone of the caliber he wanted. And Hassan, Nasruddin's friend, worked at the palace, and he said to Nasruddin, "You know, you've been a Hodja. You could do the job." And Nasruddin said, "Oh, I don't think he'd want me." But what he took to doing was carrying a fishing net on his shoulder as he went around the marketplace. And one night, the Sultan saw him and said, "Man, why have you got a fishing net on your place, on your shoulder?" And Nasruddin said, "I'm a Hodja now. I have the turban. I'm a teacher. But in my youth, I was a humble man, and I worked as a fisherman. And I carry the net so I'll never forget my origins, that I am a humble man." And the Sultan said, "This is the man I need." And he appointed Nasruddin to the court as his chief justice. And Nasruddin poshed up in his posh robes and went along to the court. And one day Hassan was there and he saw Nasruddin was in his robes, but no net. And Hassan said, "Nasruddin, why is it you're not wearing the net?" And Nasruddin said, "You don't need the net once you've landed the fish." Sorry, I couldn't resist that little story. I hope you liked it, Louis. Now, let's go for a bit of a longer story, shall we? Does anyone here know the story of Brave Tokoya? Brave Tokoya was a young woman in her teens, and she lived on the coast in ancient Japan. And her dad was a healer, and he would go healing people. He'd always hoped she would be, but her leaning was towards being an oyster fisher. She loved to get she's like yourself, Louis. She loved to swim. She loved to jump into the water, go down deep, and take her knife and prise open the oysters and see whether there was a pearl. Sometimes there was, sometimes there wasn't. That was part of the joy. And the scenery underwater, the way the world was so different and the light changed. And she was like that. But one day, the local warlord became ill, and he sent for all the healers in the area, and one of them was her dad. And they had the strange thing, he felt like he was drowning all the time. His lungs were filling with water, and he could do nothing about it. No healer had been able to sort him out. Neither was Tokoya's father able to help. So he exiled all the healers, he cast them all out. And Tokoya's father was sent to a distant island. Tokoya didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to him before he was gone. And so she sold the pearls she had found and bought a boat, and she sailed to the island to look for her father. When she landed, she started along the beach, and she saw some locals and a priest standing with a girl who was dressed in a silver robe, trying to push her into the sea while she fought against them. And Tokoya ran up and said, "What's wrong? What's happening? What's going on?" And the priest said, "Stay out of it." And the girl looked at her and said, "Can you help me?" And Sequoia's dad had taught her, you never pass up a cry for help. With him, it was healing. With her, it was general bravery. And so she said, "What's the problem here?" And the priest said, "We have a serpent that lives in a cave just off the island, and we give him a sacrifice once a year. We sacrifice one of our young people to keep the serpent calm, so it doesn't create storms which destroy our boats, doesn't grab the nets and pull down our boats, doesn't rip the nets apart and let the fish free. We need to keep the serpent calm for our people to live." And Tokoya said, "Let me take the place of the girl you're going to sacrifice." And the priest said, "Why would you do that?" And she said, "Well, I'm willing to, if it'll help." And the priest said, "Well, very well, then you must put on the silver sacrificial robe so that the serpent knows that you're for him." So Tokoya put on the robe, took a huge breath, she breathed all the way out, then all the way into her tummy was like Buddha's, it was just popping out, and she jumped into the water and swam down and down and down until she saw a cave. And it looked as though the cave had a man in front of it, but it was actually a statue of a man. And it looked just like the warlord. And its mouth was open, and the seawater was washing in and out. And suddenly, before she'd even realized it, the serpent's face, the head came out from the cave, and it caught her. She was caught in the jaws, but it hadn't closed yet, and she pushed away with her feet, and she swam out of his jaws. And the serpent bit down and looked totally confused. Where was its food? Where was its sacrifice? And then it saw her, and it turned to her, and it turned to her, and it kept following her while she tried to swim away. And it lunged again, and it just caught the end of her robe, and a silver bit of cloth fell off, and the serpent looked away and followed the cloth instead of her. And she realized it didn't have good eyesight, but it was the silver that attracted it. So she quickly took off the robe and dropped it. And the serpent went down after the robe, and Tokoya jumped onto his neck, pulled out her knife and stabbed him in both eyes and cut his throat. And the blood pumped out, and she hung on to the serpent, and the blood got slower and slower and slower. And in the end, the serpent just floated down to the bottom, dead. Brave Tokoya had killed the serpent. And what she did was she took some of the broken nets that were lying on the bottom where the serpent had pulled them out of the fishing boats. She wrapped it round the statue. And with her lungs straining, she swam back up to the surface and to the shore. And she told them what she'd done. She'd killed the serpent. She'd set them free. And she asked them to pull in the nets and pull in the statue. And she got the statue on the shore and she lay it on its side so the water ran out. And when that happened, the warlord, back in their home, the warlord was cured. And when the word got back to him about it, he brought Tokoya and her father home to his province. And he rewarded her handsomely. And that's the end of that little story. I think it's quite a good story. What do you think, Louis? Yeah, good one? It's a bit bloodthirsty, isn't it? But I think it's really good. She was a brave, brave girl. Yeah. Now, let's have another Najruddin story, shall we? Najruddin's friend, you remember his friend Hassan, who worked at the court? Because he had a regular job, he was often taken care of. Well, no, taking care of Najruddin. He would have regular money, and Najruddin sometimes would say, I have no money, my friend, I've got no money. What can we do? And Hassan would say, yeah, all right, I'll buy you coffee, I'll buy you pastries. And it went on for years, and it just kept building up and building up. And they were in the coffee shop, and Najruddin said, oh, I've got no money, what can I do? Hassan said, I'll buy you some coffee, I'll buy you some pastries. And once they were finished, they left and they started going home, and they cut down an alleyway. And suddenly, ahead of them in the alleyway were two great, big, strapping fellows. And one of the strapping fellows said, you got any money for a couple of orphans? Can you spare a coin, sir? And Najruddin said, I've remembered a better way home. And they turned round to go back to the stop, and there were two more strapping great fellas. And they said, do you have any money for 4 orphans? And Najruddin looked at Hassan. Hassan looked at Najruddin, and Hassan said, I think we're caught. And Najruddin said, yes. Oh dear. And he reached into his pockets and he searched around, and he found a bag of money, just a few coins. And he pulled it out and he looked at them longingly. And he said, this is disastrous. Hassan, here's the money I owe you. And he gave Hassan the money, and the robbers stole Hassan's money. Always thinking, isn't he? Always thinking, Najruddin. And Alistair, I'm sorry about the blood. I hope it wasn't too upsetting. Perhaps I'll do another Japanese story that's not quite so bloody, although it has got some... Well, it's from Japan. What do you expect? It's got some nasty bits. Once upon a time, there was a really lovely old couple who lived in Japan. And they were the kindest people you could ever hope to meet. Loving, helpful to their neighbours, very poor, perhaps because they were so helpful. But their one sorrow was they didn't have any children of their own. And then one day, the woman from the couple who was down washing at the stream saw a big peach leaf, and really gigantic peach leaf. And on the peach leaf was a snow white dog, just a puppy. And she pulled it to the shore and took it home. And the couple loved that puppy. They treated it like it was a child of their own. They fed it, they looked after it. And over about 9 months, it grew to be a great big, pure white coloured dog. Wonderful dog. They called him Snowy, but go with the English word. And he was a lovely dog, and they loved him. And then one day, the old man of the couple was out, and he was chopping wood and digging in their little bit of a field. They had a tiny field where they tried to raise a bit of food. And suddenly, Snowy started digging and barking. The old man ignored him at first, but they said, what are you doing, Snowy? What are you doing? What are you playing at? And he went over and he started digging where Snowy had been digging. And lo and behold, they found a pot full of gold. Full of gold. He was amazed. And he took the gold home and he said to his wife, what shall we do, wife? What shall we do with this gold? And she said, well, we don't need much gold, do we? We're old. Why don't we keep 5 or 6 coins for ourselves, and we give everything else to the villagers? Our friends in the village, they can all have some of the gold. So that's what they did. I told you they were kind. But their next door neighbour was a bit of a nasty man, a bit mean, a bit like Scrooge McDuck. You know, he loved money. And he said, do you think I could borrow Snowy for a little while, and he can help me in my field and see what he can find for me? So the neighbour took Snowy, who wasn't keen to go. He had to keep pulling the rope to get him to go because the neighbour was a nasty man. But they got to the field, and the neighbour said, right, show me where I can find some gold. And Snowy whined and tried to get under the hedge, and the neighbours lifted his spade and said, "Show me the gold!" And sort of Snowy tried to dig under the hedge with his paws, and the neighbour got so angry he hit him. He hit him. And I'm afraid he hit him so hard that Snowy died. Oh, he was cross. And he dug where Snowy had been hitting, and there he found a stench trench. Oh, it was disgusting. It was full of filth and smell. No gold. And he was even more angry. And he flung Snowy's body over at the trench and stormed off home. And the next day, the old woman said, "Snowy hasn't come home yet from the neighbour." And so the old man said, "I'll go and ask about it." And he went and said, "Hello, hello." I forgot to knock. He was very polite. He did knock. Hello, have you finished with Snowy? Can we take him home again? And the neighbour said, "That dog of yours, oh, nothing but trouble." And the man said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll take him away then." He said, "He was so annoying. I'm afraid he annoyed me so much I hit him with my shovel. And he was so weak he just died. He up and died on me." Oh. So the old man said, "Do you think I can take his body then?" And he said, "By all means, he's out there in the trench." And so he took Snowy home and he dug a hole for him and buried him. And overnight, from the side of the hole, grew a great cherry tree. And it was in one night, and it was enormous. And the old couple were really pleased because they thought, there's a real good memorial for Snowy. But the next night, the old woman had a dream. And in the dream, she saw Snowy. And Snowy told her somehow that she was to chop down the cherry tree and to make a mortar and a pestle and make rice puddings to celebrate Snowy's life with the whole village. That should have been rice cakes. Rice cakes to celebrate Snowy's life with the whole village. So, with some reluctance, they chopped down the cherry tree and they fashioned a mortar and they fashioned a pestle. And they put rice in it to start making, and they started grinding it. And just non-stop, rice cakes kept coming out and coming out and coming out and coming out till they had hundreds of rice cakes, so they could feed the whole village. They couldn't believe their good fortune. Snowy had come through for them again. And the next door neighbour, you know what he's like, he said, "Do you think I could borrow the pestle and mortar? And I can make some rice cakes to also celebrate the life of Snowy." I think he wasn't going to celebrate. But anyway, he took it home and he put some rice in. He started grinding, and snakes and wasps and beetles and everything came out of the mortar, and no rice cakes. He was so angry, he threw it out the door. And then he burned it, set fire to it. And the next day, the old woman said to her husband, "He didn't bring back the pestle and mortar." And he said, "Well, I'll go and ask for it back." And he went and, "Hello, can I take back the pestle and mortar?" "Oh, that pestle and that mortar, they were awful. I've burned them. They were dreadful. I've burned them." So the old man said, "Oh, do you think I might take the ashes as a memento of Snowy?" And so the neighbour said, "Yeah, take them," and gave him a rickety old bowl thing he could put the ashes in. He put the ashes in the bowl. He started walking home, and the breeze got up and it just blew some of the ashes off the top of the bowl, and they fell on the ground, and everywhere they fell, flowers popped up, flowers bloomed. And the old man was amazed, and when he got home, he looked at the stump of the cherry tree where they'd cut it down, and he threw the ashes on it, and it grew again, and even though it was late in the year, it blossomed. Well, when word of this got to the warlord, he said, "Now I've got an old cherry tree in my garden that my great-grandfather planted, and it's never blossomed in my lifetime. If you can make it blossom, it'll be worth your while. So he took the old man to his garden. The old man scattered a few of the ashes on the tree, and it burst into blossom. There were blossom everywhere. And the warlord said, I will call you Hanasakan Jisai. You will be the man who made the tree blossom. And he gave him more money. He gave him a pot full of silver. He went home, the old man, and he said to his wife, I've got more money now. What should we do? She said, we'll give it away. We don't need it. So they gave it away. And the neighbour was jealous because, again, good fortune had come to the old man. And he took what was left of the ashes and scraped them into a bowl and went around crying, Oh, I'll restore your trees. I'll restore your trees. And a rich merchant who was a good friend of the warlord heard him, said, I've got a withered tree. Come and you can restore it. And he went there and he threw the ashes on the tree. And he threw more. And in the end, he chucked the whole bowl at the tree. The tree did nothing, but some of the ashes got caught in that little breeze and got blown into the merchant's eyes. And the merchant was so angry. And he went and complained to his friend, the warlord. And the warlord, we know what he's like. He said, Right, I'm going to exile that man. He's going into exile. And he decided he had to go. Well, originally, actually, he wanted to kill him. He wanted to execute him, but the old man and his wife pleaded for him and he commuted it to exile. But then the warlord was going to obviously take all his property and then send him into exile. But the old man saw him before he went and gave him the gold coins that he and the old lady had saved. And that just goes to show that when you're kind, and when you're nasty, you stay nasty. And that was the story of Hanasaka Jihisan, the old man who restored the cherry trees. Now, how about another? Oh, thank you, Alistair. Another
Very, very great one, Mike. Now I know why I'm always broke.
because you're kind.
Start being kind to people.
Yeah, I think we're going to be strangers to money, you and me, but not for kindness. So, one last little Najruddin, yeah? Should we do that? Okay, then. One day, Hassan came upon Najruddin. He was standing on the walls of the town, blowing mustard seeds into the air. And Hassan said, What are you doing? And Najruddin said, I'm defending the town. He said, What do you mean? He said, Well, the horses that the Mongol hordes ride, they can't stand mustard seeds. So I'm blowing the mustard seeds so that the Mongol hordes and their horses won't come near the town. And Hassan said, The Mongol hordes are nowhere near here. And Najruddin said, Yes, I know. The seeds are good, aren't they? I'd better keep on. And he blew some more. I wonder whether we've got time. John, are we all right for another little Japanese story? Not quite as bad. Not quite as so bloody or so brutal. I'm going to take your silence for consent. This is another story about a kind old couple who had no children.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, John. They had no children. They longed for children, and the husband was a woodcutter, and the wife was a washerwoman. And once again, she was down by the river washing the clothes, and she saw a peach coming down the river. A giant, bigger than big, giant peach. And she managed to get it to the shore and roll it home. She said, We could have that for our dinner for days to come. And when her husband got back from woodcutting, she said, Look at this giant peach we've got. And he said, Oh, and he sharpened his knife. He said, Let's cut into it. And he started cutting it. It fell apart, and there in the middle was a baby, a little baby. So they called the baby Momotaro, which meant Peach Boy. And he grew so quickly. In about 9 months, he was as big as Louis. You'd have thought he was 17. He was so big and strong. And he said, Now that I'm nearly a year old, I have a quest that I need to do. And the parents, the new parents, said, "What's your quest?" He said, "I've heard that the ogres have stolen treasure from all the villages around, and my quest is to go and get back the treasure." And the mum said, "Well, that's a good idea, but let me bake you some special buns to give you strength of a dragon. You eat a bun and you'll have the strength of a dragon." So she baked him the buns and he set off, and he was walking along and he had a stick, a big stick, and he had a bag with his buns in, and suddenly a dog jumped in front of him. It went because it was a dog. And the dog looked at him and said, "You're very strong. You must be Momotaro." And he said, "I am Momotaro." And the dog said, "May I come with you on your quest? May I have one of your buns and come with you?" And Momotaro said yes, and gave him a bun, and the dog ate the bun. He had the strength of a dragon. And he carried on. And then a monkey came down from the trees, and the dog went, "Arr!" And the monkey went, "Ee, ee, ee," and said, "Are you Momotaro?" To Momotaro. Momotaro said, "Yes, I am." And the monkey said, "May I have one of your buns?" And Momotaro said, "If you will come on our quest, you can have a bun." And the monkey said, "Yes, I'll come on your quest." And he had one of the buns. He had the strength of a dragon. And they carried on. And then out of the trees flew a peacock. It was not a peacock, I lied. It was a pheasant. I misspoke. I didn't lie, I misspoke. Flew a pheasant. And the pheasant said, "Are you Momotaro?" And Momotaro said, "Yes, I am." And the pheasant said, "Can I have one of your buns?" And Momotaro said, "If you'll accompany us on our quest, you can have one of our buns." And the pheasant agreed it would. And Momotaro got out the bun and the pheasant acquired the strength of a dragon. And they carried on. And eventually they came to the shore and they could see the Ogre Island just across a narrow strait. And they borrowed a boat and they sailed across. And they walked into the island, and there they saw the ogre's palace, the stronghold, more of a castle really. And Momotaro bashed on the door. No response. He bashed again. No response. He said to the pheasant, "Fly over the door and see what's happening." So the pheasant flew over the door, and she flew back and said, "The ogres are all drunk. They've been feasting and drinking, and they're all drunk, and I think none of them are awake enough to hear the door." And the monkey said, "I'll climb up the wall and open the door." And the monkey shot up the wall over the inside, and the doors wouldn't move. So Momotaro ate a bun, the dog ate a bun, the monkey ate a bun, and they pushed with the strength of 3 dragons, and the door flew open. And in they marched, and they started beating on the ogres and whacking them with sticks, and the dog was clawing them, and the monkey was pummeling them, and the pheasant was pecking at them. And the ogres were all barely awake, but really scared. And in the end, the chief of the ogres said, "Stop, stop, we surrender, we surrender. What can we do to help? What do you need?" And Momotaro said, "I need you to load all the treasures from my district on a barrow and run us down to our boat." So the ogres loaded all the treasures, and they pulled the barrow down to the boat, and they loaded the boat with all the treasures, and they sailed back home. And then they took the treasures back to the village, and they spread them back out amongst all the villagers. And that was the end of another story. The poor old ogres got robbed, but then again, they stole the stuff in the first place, didn't they? And did you notice this time there was no cruelty to dogs? We don't mind cruelty to ogres, do we?
No, we like everything to be. Well, cruelty to ogres and mean neighbours and stuff
Yeah.
is fine. We never have mean neighbours. But you actually have time for another story if you've got one in your pocket. I know we thought Hulla was going to be here this week today.
Yeah.
We were hoping, but she's in mourning. Well, the whole family's in mourning because the death on Easter Monday of her cousin, as for obvious causes.
Yeah. Oh, God.
So but if you happen to have another story in your pocket, if not, I'll announce what's coming up.
Yeah, I have. Yes, indeed.
We don't want to shortchange King Louis,
No,
or else
absolutely
it
not.
might be a
Absolutely not.
case of off with our heads.
Oh no, no. I've got a couple to choose from, but neither seems very. I'll go with the this one. It's about a different boy called Louis, and it was his birthday too. And Louis, for years, all he really wanted was a dog. And every time his birthday was coming up, or Christmas, or Easter, even, he'd say, "Mum, can I have a dog?" And his mum used to say, "We'll see." Now, Louis, you know what that means, don't you? When grown ups say "we see," it means not a hope, no chance, no. Um, but one year they'd done really well, and his mum had money to spare, and she thought he's a bit older now, he can look after a dog. So she said, "Yes, I'll get you a dog." I forgot to stop doing this. Is dog. Let me teach you some tricks. Alistair, you already know it. So this is dog. This is stick. Uh, bread. Pot. Coat. These are things we will need as we go through the story. So his mum said, "Yes, I'll get you a dog." That's it. But the night before Louis's birthday, there was a flood, and the poor little dog got washed away in the flood. And his mum said, "Oh no, what can I do?" And she remembered that upstairs in the loft, she had his dad's old walking stick. So she said, "I'll give him that." And so she said, "I'm sorry, Louis. I haven't got a dog for you. It got washed away in the flood. But look, I've got your dad's old walking stick." Eh, Louis, Louis was a really good boy. He didn't let on how upset he was. He said, "Oh, that's fine. Yeah, look, I'll play tricks with it." And he'd say, so he took the stick and he'd say, "Fall down," and it fell down. And he said, "Stay," and it stayed. And then his mum said, "Why don't you take your stick out and go for a walk?" He said, "I will." And he went out with his
Stick.
stick. Yeah. And he walked along, and suddenly he could smell this really horrible black smoke, and he was coughing, and he could hear someone else coughing really badly. And he went along, and there was the village baker, and she was coughing and coughing, and he said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh, Louis, the flood has soaked my kindling. I can't get the oven to light so I can make the bread, so I can't make any bread." And Louis said, "Look, I tell you what, I've got my dad's old walking stick, so why don't we chop it up? You can put that in with your normal kindling. It will burn because it's been in the loft, it's dry, and it will dry your kindling and the oven will work." So the village baker said, "Let's see how that goes." And it worked. The oven got hot. And so the village baker said, "Thank you for the stick. Let me give you some bread."
Money.
No, bread. Not bread meaning money. The first loaf that she cooked in the oven. So she gave Louis the loaf. And Louis walks along, and the baker said, "Don't start eating it yet. It's a little bit hot. Wait till it's cooled a bit." So he's walking along, and he thought, "What a funny day. I wanted a
Dog.
dog, but I got a
Stick.
that's turned into
Stick.
some."
Bread.
Bread.
That's it. And he walks along with his bread, and then he heard a baby. He heard this kind of a noise. It was a baby crying. He came along. That's it, a bit like that. And there was the village potter, and he was holding his baby and rocking backwards and forwards. And Louis said, "What's wrong?" And the potter said, "Oh, my poor baby is so hungry, but the baker wasn't able to make any bread, so I didn't get any bread to feed him." And Louis looked at his bread, and he said, "I've got some bread. Why don't you take it and feed the baby?" And ever so quickly, the baker fed the baby. And before you know it, the baby was asleep. So it was just the two. And the potter put the baby down, got back to work. "I must give you something, Louis." And Louis said, "Oh, you don't need to. It's all right. I'm fine." And he said, "No, no, no. Let me give you something. Here you are. Have a big
Pot.
Yes.
pot. Yeah, pot.
Yeah.
You'll find a use for it. When Louis, well, thank you. Thank you. And he walked away and he thought, what a
Steak.
funny day. I wanted a,
Dog,
Dog.
but I got a,
stick,
Stick.
that turned into some,
bread,
Bread.
that turned into a,
Pot.
yes, great big pot. And he walked along. Then he heard the most awful noise. Oh, I'm bloody so stupid. I'm an idiot.
He's very good.
And there was the village washman. And Louis said, what's wrong? And the washman said, I'm so stupid. I left my big wash pot out last night and it's got smashed in the flood. And Louis said, oh, no. He said, I tell you what, though, I've got this great big pot. Why don't you have it to do your washing? So he gave it to him. He said, well, thank you. And he said, you know what? I've got this big old coat.
coat.
Never been collected. I'll give it to you. And he said, well, thank you. He had to sort of hoik it up and tie it up and put a string around it because it was way too big for him. And he kept on walking. And then he heard,
A two.
exactly, sneezing and ouch. And he came along and there was an old man in his underwear, shivering away with a dog at his feet. And Louis said, oh, on earth, what's wrong? And the old man said, oh, I'm frozen through to the bone. I'm sopping wet. I saw this dog in the flood. I jumped in and rescued it, but now I'm so cold. Louis, I bet you know what the other Louis said, don't you?
Yeah.
He said, I've got this.
Have a coat.
Yeah, have my coat. And the old man put the coat on, and before you know it, he'd warmed up a bit. He's not feeling so bad. And he said, little boy, will you do me one more favour? And Louis, of course, he was such a good boy. He said, yes, what would you like me to do? He said, will you take this dog and give it a good home? Because I can't do that. I can't take the dog. Louis was so thrilled. He said, yeah, I'll take his dog. Oh, yes, please. I'll take him home. I can teach him tricks. I can, Mum, I've got a dog and I'll be good to him. I'll look after him properly. And he set off home with his dog. And as he walked along, he thought to himself, what a strange day, but what a wonderful day. I wanted a
Dog.
yeah, but I got a
Stick.
yeah. That turned into a
Bread.
that turned into a
Pot,
Pot.
that turned into a
coat,
A coat.
that's turned into a dog of my very own. That's what he got because he was such a good, kind boy. So it's always good to be kind, isn't it? All these stories are just kind people. And that's
Always
my last
be
story, I
kind
think. Yeah,
to your parents.
exactly. Always be kind, and the world will be kind to you. Isn't that right, Louis?
yeah, I concur. Mike, that was fantastic evening. Thank you very much. I heard most of it from my pocket as I was walking home from the laundrette. But I managed to get back in time for for after the first 8 minutes or so. So what have we got coming up? Oh, well, I think a round of applause for Mike before we go any further. Yeah, right. And Sunday at 6 p.m. UK and Irish time, that's British summertime now. I have to emphasize this, and for another few weeks, actually, so everyone's got used to it. We have our worldwide story round hosted by Mike Rust. So please come and join us wherever you are listening. There's I need to mention on our page there'll be a little hat. Mike, as you can see, is getting thinner by the day, and we need to keep him going. So drop a penny in the old man's hat. Yeah, what you say, Mike?
John, if anyone wants to give some money, can they give it to the Gaza appeal rather than to me? Because I think they need it more.
Yeah, well, okay. So there'll be, if you look at recent performances, go to Normans that's got it up, or go to the World Storytelling Cafe community site. That's or my Facebook, but my Facebook, it's all probably everyone's Facebook has got the link on Valhalla. But they need it enormously at the moment. And so what's happening next Friday? Next Friday, I know you were special, Mike, but this is really special. We have the second of our young tellers doing a whole program of their own. So we have Jasna from Punjab telling stories from India for a whole program. So I'm really looking forward to that. So once a month now, while we're not, I will revive Young Tellers, but I'm not sure in what form. But for now, we've got our graduates doing their own program once a month. So anyway, so thank you. And thank you, Waleed, as always, for playing the magic carpet. Thank you, Alistair, for popping along live. And King Sir Mr. Louis. Whoa.
Yes.
Well, it is such a pleasure to have you back. It's
Thank
not
you.
the same when you're not here.
But I am doing the Sunday Cafe after next. I'm going to see you week after next week as well.
Excellent.
I'm back to school on Tuesday, but I'm not in school on Monday. I do a extra day off training. All I did is in school, in the unit and next room, they all do training with Mr. Andrews as well. So everyone's doing training on the Monday. So everyone's back on Tuesday on normal day.
Fantastic. So all I have to say is good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you are in this big, wide world. And once more, a round of applause for Mike. Bye-bye, and thank you, Willie.
Bye-bye. Bye, Alistair. Bye, Mike.
Yeah, you see, you have to go, and there's one or two people have gone sat down to the